I retired from Marine Corps last year in August, and August Schell was gracious enough to bring me on board to the company to run the CMMC program through the Skill Bridge program. Over that 22 and a half years in the Marine Corps, I've worked in IT, intelligence, and information operations. So I definitely understand the threats that are out there. And we definitely want to thank you all for joining us today for this CMMC 2.0 presentation. It's very, very important to us, as me and Mike have both served in the military, and we see firsthand how information leaked from the defense industrial base makes it into the hands of our enemies. And that's really what CMMC at the heart of it is designed to help prevent with a couple of additional measures. So I will be joined by Mike Baca, and I will let him introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. Mike Baca. I'm the CIO here at August Schell. I've been with August Schell for about a year. I also came out of the Marine Corps. Prior to that, I had a threat hunting intelligence background. And, one of the challenges of CMMC for most organizations is it's essentially the transference of risk from the DoW now to the defense industrial based companies. So that can seem like an overwhelming challenge for many organizations. And we've been there. We've, gone through the process ourselves. And so the goal today is kind of highlight, what is CMMC, maybe deconstruct or, break down some of the initial fear, barriers, or concerns with CMMC, and kind of highlight, what you're currently doing today, how you're already meeting some of those controls when it comes to CMMC with Splunk. So pass it off to Corey.
All right, so just a quick disclaimer here, forward-looking statements. We will talk about things today that are in the future. We don't control those things. This is how we are interpreting and viewing the rules that are put out by the Department of War and Cyber AB. Just a quick disclaimer in regards to that. So as far as the agenda Mike talked about, we're going to talk to you about CMMC 2.0 today. I'll start off talking a little bit about August Schell Professional Services and how we can support you. Really what changed November 10th, talking specifically about the CMMC 2.0 phase rollout, how it impacts your contract eligibility. We're going to talk about some lesser known facts, considerations, and strategies around CMMC. Then Mike is going to start diving into some of those technical implementation requirements for all those cybersecurity folks out there. Okay, so first, August Schell. August Schell is a registered practitioner organization. We're also a candidate C3 PAO. Now, those are two different types of things. So I'll explain. An RPO is designed to get your company ready for a CMMC assessment. That's consulting, that's implementation, training your staff, helping you with documentation, okay? A C3 PAO is a little bit different in the sense that their job is to come in and assess you and get you certified, right, for level 2. And I say level 2 because level 1, there is no C3 PAO requirements, it's self-assessment. Level 2 is a C3 PAO, and level 3 will be by DIBCAC, which is another government organization. Now, we are listed in the Cyber AB marketplace, so you can find our information there as well. On our CMMC team, we have 4 CMMC assessors. 3 of those are lead assessors, and that's at the top levels where we are able to conduct assessments of organizations. We currently contract out to other organizations while we're waiting our C3 PAO status to be finalized. We also have 2 additional CCAs in training, which when they get through the pipeline, they will also be lead CCAs. So I say all that to say is that the folks on our team have the highest levels of training in regards to CMMC, and they're able to help you from scoping and gap analysis, which is the basis of CMMC. You want to basically scope out where you want your UI information to go. And that's the way that we approach it, where we talk to you, find out your business processes, and we map out where you want to place it. So it's not as restrictive to your business operations. We conduct that gap analysis to ensure you have the proper sense of where you are in relation to CMMC compliance. And that's very, very important when it comes down to False Claims Acts. violations, which a couple of companies have seen here in recent news. We support secure network remediation or enclave establishment. That just goes to how many people you have, how many people within your organization are using FCI and CUI versus a small subset where we can basically move things into a smaller area of your organization's network where it doesn't impact so many different operations. We support and documentation, everything from SSPs to policies, as well as that SPRS scoring, which is required, and we'll talk a little bit more about later. And we also do C3PAO assessment support where we can sit with your organization, with the C3PAOs and help translate a lot of that CMMC language along with your documentation and how you actually conduct practices. All right, so what everybody wants to know, what changed November 10th? Okay, so basically what happened November 10th is compliance is not just a checkbox, it's a condition of doing business with the Department of War. So up until now, compliance was self-claimed under DFARS 7012, right? The interim rule meant you can self-score. So what happened last year in December was CFR 32 became a final rule. And what that was is the CMMC program was now official. And that meant that all the rules and regulations and the requirements are now official. So C3PAOs, RPOs, and organizations can basically have a final understanding of what they needed to do to meet the requirements. There's other programs before that, but this was the final one. What happened November 10th was the second part of that. And what that did was enable contracting officers to now put the language in contracts for CMMC requirements. Okay, so now you'll start seeing those, and we'll talk through a little bit about the phase rollout and how that may look. Okay, so from now until November 10th of next year, the majority of people are going to see CMMC level 1 and level 2 self-assessment requirements as a condition for contract award. Okay, that means contractors must go in and self-attest to CMMC level 1 and or level 2 in the SPRS. And if you don't know where SPRS is, easy, go into Google, type in SPRS. It'll take you directly to the site. And there's a bunch of guides in there that kind of gives you a little bit more information. Okay, but I will add a disclaimer. The Department of War and contracting officers might, and they may at their discretion, implement CMMC level 2 C3PAO assessment and certification requirements. And again, that's up to the Department of War and how they want to do that. So moving on to phase 2. Okay, so phase 2 happens again, November 11th, 2026. And that's when things are going to start ramping up a little bit more, where you will start seeing in contracts CMMC level 2 certification requirements by a C3PAO. Okay, and also with that, you might start seeing some CMMC level 3 requirements for those select members of the DIB that handle critical national security projects and programs. Okay. So a quick note in regards to this is that all level 2 certifications must be current within 3 years of that date, okay? And what that means is you need to have been assessed by a C3PAO within 3 years of that date. And going along with that, even if you are assessed by a C3PAO, you also need to go into SPRS and update your scores annually, okay? Now, if nothing is changing in your network, make no major changes in your organization, this should be a fairly easy process, provided you continuously monitoring your network. Okay, moving on to phase 3. So CMMC phase 3, November 11th, 2027 through November 10th, 2028. So that is where they're going to start implementing certifications as a requirement to exercise option periods or extensions on contracts awarded after November 2025. Okay, and then this is where level 3 certifications are going to be starting to become more enforced by the Department of War, and the DIBCAC will be doing level 3 assessments. Then that final phase, Phase 4 is full enforcement of the program, expected to be November 11, 2028 through 2029. And that's where all CMMC requirements are in place, and you will start seeing a lot more of them in contract awards. And again, just a quick reminder, all those certifications must be done within 3 years of that date for it to count, and maintained throughout the life of those contracts while you're supporting the Department of War. Okay. So moving on, how enforcement impacts contract eligibility. I mean, I know a lot of people here have probably been following it, and if you all have questions, please ask towards the end. But basically, what it boils down to is if you do not have the required CMMC certification, whether it be a self-attestation or a C3PAO certification or a DivCAC assessment, you will not be eligible for award for that specific contract. And that contract will have language in it that explains that requirement, okay? Same thing with renewals. If you're looking to renew a contract after that specific date in phase 3, you will not be able to renew that contract. So it's definitely important to start planning now to get your CMMC level 1, 2, or 3 requirements moving forward, okay? In regards to flow downs, okay, it is going to be the prime contractor's responsibility to ensure that everybody, their subcontractors and everybody in their downline have CMMC, the required CMMC level of certification. Okay, we're going to talk through a little bit of a couple of different ways that you can kind of do that and some strategies, but it will be the prime contract holder's responsibility to ensure that's done. Okay, now some of the documentation proof that you're going to need to show in regards to CMMC to prove that you are abiding by the rules is that SPURS score. That's going to be the number one thing that is going to be looked at in the system, especially for this first year of CMMC. And that's going to be level 1 and level 2 self-assessed compliant. Second one, of course, is going to be that C3PAO certificate that says you're level 2 certified by a third-party assessor organization. Some other documents that are very, very critical is that SSP, that System Security Plan. That is a core document for this program, and it is an absolute requirement, as well as your POA&M in relation to what is met, what's not met, and the plans to get those things closed out in the POA&M, as well as evidence of ongoing control monitoring. Those are all things that you're going to need to document proof of when you're speaking with a C3PAO and or DivCAC in relation to your assessment. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about lesser known facts and some considerations and strategies around CMMC. So understanding that the CMMC ecosystem is pretty small in relation to the DIB, okay? Some estimates, 200,000 companies. There's a lot of companies in the DIB, as you all can imagine, that either have been around a long time or entering in various different stages and levels. So as far as CMMC, to get you assessed and get you ready, or get you ready and assessed, it can take anywhere from 6 to 12 to even 18 months. It really just depends on the complexity of your network. If you want to do an all-in approach or a secure enclave, how many people, a lot of different things go into that. But that's just a consideration. So you want to get started now. You want to get things done to where you are compliant when it's time to be compliant. And again, I'll talk about that small community. 352 RPOs right now in the system. So 352 organizations that are certified, licensed, and able to provide you the support you need to get ready for a C3PAO assessment. And I will tell organizations that you want to seek out an RPO to help get you ready before you engage a C3PAO. Because when you work with a RPO, their job is specifically to get you ready. When you engage a C3PAO, they kind of can't get you ready. Their job is to assess you, so either you're ready or not, Okay, there's a little bit of nuance in regards to that and how far along you get in the process with the C3PAO. But I would I would recommend that to get ready, start with the RPO to get you the right consultation and the right snapshot of your current picture to get you ready. And then about 537 certified assessors within the ecosystem right now. So 537 people in the world that are certified to be able to get you to CMMC level 2, stamp the certificate, and make sure you can hand that in to the Department of War or whoever you need to in regards to executing your contracts. One thing I want to talk about is the pending FARS CUI rule. Okay. CMMC was born out of the FARS CUI rule, and the Department of War, back then the Department of Defense, kept getting information stolen, as evidenced by seeing F-35, like aircraft in media around the world. That is not our aircraft, right? So the Department of War decided to jump ahead and get this program started, calling it CMMC for the Department of War. Now, the FARS CUI rule is expected to become final. I would say probably early next year. It was on track to be late 2025, but with the government shutdown, most likely going to be sometime early to mid 2026. Now, what this is going to do is expand CMMC type requirements across the entire federal space, which means that if you do business with the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, any federal agency where CUI is involved, you're going to fall under CMMC type rules, and you're going to be required to provide, provide that proof that you are meeting the requirements of that contract in protecting CUI. POA&Ms. Okay, so POA&Ms and passing an assessment. Okay, understanding that for CUI information and level 1, which is really FCI, that federal contract information, there's no POA&M. So meeting level 1 requirements, you either meet all of them or you don't, pretty much. Passing that assessment with CMC level 2. So you can put items into a POA&M when you are going for CMMC level 2. And if those security objectives are partially met, compensating measures that don't reduce immediate risk to your organization, that C3PO can grant you a interim CMMC level 2 certificate. However, anything that is not met or passed within that assessment needs to be remediated within 180 days. If it is not remediated within 180 days, that means they will revoke your assessment, okay? So some things can be put in the POA&M, some things cannot be put in the POA&M, and these are things that we call 5 and 3 pointers, okay? If you are being assessed by a C3PAO and you hit some of these things like, you don't have an SSP, you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled. You don't have FIPS validated encryption. And I say validated because it's very, very important to understand that it needs to be validated, not compliant, or it needs to be validated. Incident response capabilities, boundary firewall protections, audit logging, security assessment process, configuration management baseline, and basic account management. If those things are not met at the time that a C3PAO comes and assesses you, those are automatic failures, and it means you have to get started from scratch. So those are things that you want to consider in your strategy in regards to getting ready for a C3PAO assessment, is making sure that the 5 and 3 items, those things that automatically fail you, are done properly and effectively and appropriately documented. So another strategy, okay, using a prime contractor's IT systems, okay, this is something that can be done, okay, but there's very, very, there's rules and there's things that need to be done before you go through the assessment that ensures that you are compliant and that organizations are compliant. And really, a lot of it comes down to that SSP, ensuring that your organization is written into that plan. The systems that are provided to you are in that plan. It's similar to thinking of government furnished equipment, right? But only it's furnished by that prime. So they can hand you a laptop to work on that contract, and you can technically be CMMC compliant. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that next. Okay. Page codes, joint ventures, and mentor-protege relationships. Okay, so when a company is certified in relation to CMMC, it is all tied to the cage code. Okay, that cage code is what is the certification is going to be tied to, right? So if you have a joint venture, making sure that the appropriate one is entered into the system, given to that C3PAO, whether you're putting it in SPRS or you're registering for an assessment, that the appropriate code is used. And again, there's a little bit more nuance to that. It can be done, but it just needs to be done appropriately. So that organization, the prime, and their subcontractors are in compliance. So now I will hand it over to Mike, and he's going to talk a little bit more in detail in regards to the technical requirements for CMMC.
All right. Well, thanks, Corey, and thanks for thoroughly scaring most of the participants here. No, but in all seriousness, right? It's not as difficult. I would say it is difficult, but it's not as difficult as first appears. So, what is level one? Right? Level one is FCI. So when we think about FCI, think about its federal contracting information. So anything that you have to access via a portal, anything that's shared to you directly from a customer concerning contracts that's not shared openly, that I can't go in as a non employee or a third party and just access that information. So that would be FCI. And essentially, when you look at that, it's tied to FAR 25.204 TAC 21, and there's 15 foundational practices, but there's 17 requirements. So one of those foundational practices, you'll see that there's a sub requirement within there. And what that essentially translates to is 17 requirements. And what you're essentially doing with those 17 requirements are implementing basic cybersecurity controls. They're not anything that's extremely burdensome. They're things that you're probably doing today and you've been doing for a while because they're just best practices. So again, if you're concerned about that, or if that's the type of information that you're focused on, the Department of War does have scoping guidance, and they also have assessment guidance. So that scoping guidance can be used to help scope out, what your environment looks like, what that CUI or that FCI is in your environment, and what that data flow lifecycle looks like. Now, level two, this is when we start to get a little more difficult. And those that are familiar with NIST RMF, you'll see that there's some there's a ton of similarity, and that's because they intentionally pulled the controls from the 853. So they pulled from the NIST RMF security control catalog, and they basically identified what are the security controls that mattered to them. Because at the end of the day, they're not trying to absorb the risk associated with the companies that they're doing business with in the future. What they're doing is they're passing that risk to you. So they changed it from security controls or practices, is what they called it before, to now requirements. So they're definitely putting a hard line in the sand to say that these are the requirements for you to be CMMC compliant. And within those 110 requirements, they're broken up into 17 requirement families. Those families are aligned with the 853. And within those requirements, though, there are 320 assessment objectives. So think about the requirement as, must implement multi-factor authentication. There are objectives in order to meet that. There are some requirements within that. You can't just implement any multi-factor authentication, right? It has to be replay resistant multi-factor authentication. So that's where those assessment objectives are. Now there's 320. And I know what most of you are probably thinking is, what's the best way to track this? And I'll get into that a little later, but something like Splunk Compliance Essentials can help you do that. But most of us, what I've done in the past life is most of them were tracked in an Excel document, We know that's cumbersome. There's difficult change management. You have no role-based access control. So that can get a little unruly, but it is still something that you could do today. So if you're interested or your organization has the requirement to protect CUI and to be level 2 compliant, then you can reference NIST Special Publication 800-171 Revision 3 and 171A Revision 3. Additionally, the Department of War also has some a scoping guide and an assessment guide. Now, I mentioned it twice, but what is the scoping guide and what is the assessment guide? The scoping guidance is essentially what an assessor is going to come into the environment and how they're going to scope out where the FCI or the CUI lives in your environment. And that's really important. I'll get into what different types of assets there are, but that's what that guide can help you do today. You can go through that guide. It's publicly available. And then the assessment guide walks you through the way an assessment will occur. But moving on, level 3. There's 134 requirements. So you still have all those level 2 requirements, right? All 110, but now we have 24 additional level 3 specific controls. And again, if your organization is going to have to meet level 3 compliance, it does get a little stricter, right? There are additional security controls that you have to implement. But if you want to research those, review them, that's going to be in NIST Special Publication 800-172 and 172A. All right. So why CMMC, right? I keep mentioning that it's the transference of risk, and it absolutely is. That's what it is on its face. That's what it is when you review it. It's transference of risk. The Department of War no longer wants to have to identify or verify that once they share CUI or FCI with you, that it's going to be protected. So they want you to attest to that, and they want you to certify on it. Now, historically, most of us have been attesting that we've been meeting these requirements, and we saw that commentary from Katie Arrington. That you can go back to the next slide. We did see that comment from Katie Arrington that you have been attesting to it, so there should be no issues with meeting the certification requirements. Again, it's confidentiality only. That's all they care about. They don't care about the integrity of the information. They don't care about the availability. It's solely focused on the confidentiality. And you'll see that when you review the requirements, because most of the time when you start to look at how am I going to implement these within my organization, you're going to see that there's going to be some disruption to your business operations. So, but you have to understand that you're responsible for safeguarding that CUI provided at the level required. So whenever they share that information with you, you are now you're now the stakeholder in that information. You protect that information at the same level that they protect the information. So that's primarily what CMMC is focused on from a technical requirement aspect. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so I'll cover kind of the scoping guidance for a level 2 environment or a level 2 requirement. So the first thing we need to do is identify what are we going to, what type of information are we going to have to store, process, or transmit? And if your organization only stores, processes, or transmits FCI, then you don't need to go down the path of a level 2 scoping or a level 2 assessment. But if you do handle CUI, if you are required contractually to handle CUI, then you have to scope out your environment for a level 2 assessment. And when a C3PAO, and Corey kind of, hit that you should consult with an RPO prior to going through a C3PO assessment. The reason being is I'm a lead assessor. So if I come into your organization as part of a C3PAO assessment, and I start to scope out your environment, and I see that you incorrectly scoped it, and now assets that you weren't protecting to that level 2, those level 2 requirements are now within scope. We have two options. Essentially, you being as the OSC, you can decide that I would like to defer the assessment for a future time, or you could go through with the assessment. You still have to essentially pay for the assessment, and I just tell you that you essentially I show you where you fail. I don't show you how to fix what you failed at. I can only show you where you failed and why you failed. So that's something that just kind of needs to be hammered home. As a C through PAO assessor won't come in and tell you, hey, you missed this control. This is not met. Here's how you can meet it the next time. That doesn't occur with a C through PAO. They're legally cannot do that. Instead, what I have to do is tell you that this control is not met. That's it. That's where the advice stops. Whereas an RPO can come in and do a mock assessment and they can tell you, hey, this is where you're not compliant. This is where you're not met. Here's how you can meet that requirement based off of what you're already doing in the environment. Because many times what we'll see and what we've seen is sometimes an assessor may go out of scope, and they might not go out of scope intentionally. They might go out of scope because of a lack of understanding or of knowledge of the environment that you're operating in or that you're operating as an organization. Because CMMC, something to think about, CMMC is an assessment focused program, right? It's focused on the assessment. And your organization doesn't have the same adoption that the Department of War has with RMF. This is something that Department of War has been doing for years, right? They know what is allowed and they know is not allowed, and they have their program in place. What you're doing with CMMC is I'm now bolting on these requirements into your organization. So now you have to adapt to that. So anyway, that's kind of why we recommend that you consult with an RPO prior to meeting with a C3 PAO, because once you've paid the C3 PAO to go through the assessment, if you fail, you fail. And as Corey mentioned, as you're going through those assessments, if I get to a level, a 5-point control, and it's not met, that assessment stops there. It doesn't matter how far we've gone in the assessment. It doesn't matter if we've been doing the assessment for a day, an hour, 2 hours, or 5 days. That assessment ends right there, and that's where your report ends. So how do we scope that out, right? So understanding what information our organization is going to be responsible for protecting, we have to look at the data flow coming into our organization and where that CUI touches. So anything that CUI touches for an asset to store, process, or transmit CUI data, with the exception of specialized assets, and I'll get into that in a second, those are classified as CUI assets. Those are entirely in scope, and those will be assessed by the assessor. Now, the next kind of category we have is security protection assets. And a security protection asset is essentially any asset that's used to provide a security function or capability to protect CUI. So this is your SIM. This is your Splunk environment. This is your maybe your EDR management console, right? These are things that have to be that are protecting those CUI assets, because we've seen in the past where threat actors have actually leveraged the MSPs of an organization to gain access to that organization. So the kind of what organizations are able to do, though, is if it's a FedRAMP moderate service or SaaS solution, it is authorized to protect CUI. Now, there are some things that haven't been entirely hammered out as far as the Department of War when it comes to CMMC with FedRAMP, is because DISA does have the requirement, or DoD does have the requirement, that if it's CUI that's federal or civilian and not Department of War, it needs to be physically separated from the Department of War CUI. So nobody's really hit on that yet, but we may see that guidance come down in the future. But again, anything that's used to protect those CUI assets that are within scope is within the boundary of the assessment. Now, the next are contractor risk managed assets. So these are assets that are not intended to store, process, or transmit. So think of if you have your network and maybe you implement a policy that says, hey, HR does not have access to CUI. So what that means is, in policy, you tell HR, and maybe you have some sort of technical control, but very limited technical policy control that doesn't allow HR to access that CUI. Maybe they're in the same environment, the same M365 tenant, the same Google Workspace tenant, but they don't have access to that CUI information. Their assets are considered contractor risk managed assets because they could still access the CUI. They just don't via policy, procedures, or practice. So those can be spot checked by the assessor. So as an assessor, I can actually spot check your CRM assets to verify that you're implementing some sort of essentially risk management on that system. And then the last is we have, I guess not the last, but the last kind of semi within scope is going to be a specialized asset. So a specialized asset is an asset that can store, process, or transmit CUI, but you as an organization are unable to secure it. So this could be GFE, this could government furnished equipment, this could be IoT devices, this could be test equipment, this could be, any number of kind of assets that are, this could be it could be a CCTV IP camera network. It could be different things like that where I guess that still falls in, it could fall under technically under IoT, but that would be considered a specialized asset. All right. And then the last is anything that's out of scope. So a lot of times what we've seen, done a few assessments with a partner of ours, is that organizations show up prepared for their assessment to the best of their ability, but they didn't correctly scope their environment. So they have a list of out of scope assets. And when we start to sit down and look at their CUI data flow, we quickly identify that their out of scope assets are actually within scope. So that's something to think about. There's scoping guidance for that. Definitely recommend you review it. Go to next slide, Corey. All right. So again, I kind of hit on that already, but the CMMC 2.0 Level 2 Scoping Guide is the official Department of War document concerning scoping for your CUI and FCI environment for CMMC compliance. I recommend you review it. I recommend you read it because the assessors will have read it, they'll understand it, and they're going to use that as a guide to scope out your environment. They're going to stick to it because it's what we're required to legally in order to assess your environment. So this will help you to kind of pull back maybe some misconceptions, or maybe there are parts of the business that are resistant to CMMC, which I definitely understand that, but you have to, you can use this as additional justification to identify where CUI is in your environment and where assessors are going to assess your organization. Next is the CMMC 2.0 Level 2 Assessment Guide. Again, they tried to make this program entirely transparent to show you what the assessor is initially going to look for and how they're going to look for it. Now, within the scoping or within the assessment guide, this is another Department of War document. You can find it on their website, but it can help you to set expectations, not only for yourself, but your organization. There's 3 ways that we can validate whether a practice is met or not met, or an objective is met or not met. And that's to interview. So think of a process or something that's in place. And sometimes we'll do multiples of these. We don't have to just stick to one. There's interview, there's examine. So you send over your SSP, you send over your policy documentation, and it tells me as an assessor that you're doing these things. It says that here's our company's guidance on our MFA policy. Here's our company's guidance on our acceptable use, right? Nobody is allowed to open up their laptop, access the VDI environment in the middle of a Starbucks, right? And maybe it's not as explicit, but it should be as explicit. Maybe not Starbucks specifically, but in a public place where your screen can be viewed. These are the things that you need to think about as you're looking or evaluating your environment prior to an assessment. But it helps to set those expectations. So again, so then the last is test. So again, I can interview, I can ask questions. I can go ask Corey questions about what he does daily, and the assessors will ask. They're going to go to the primarily the individuals that are not responsible, but the individuals that actually execute those policies. So leadership might be aware of the requirements, but does the sysadmin that's working, the night shift, Do they understand the requirements? Do they understand where to find your policies and procedures? Do they understand are the things that they're supposed to be doing if they're interviewed by an assessor? So that, again, that's something that you should think about, and the assessment guide can help set those expectations. And then the last is kind of keep the assessment in scope. So what you'll see is many RPOs will advertise, and we're no different, is that we can provide assessment support. So while the assessor is there, we do representation for that organization that's seeking the certification. And why would you want to pay somebody to sit there as a consultant to go through your environment with the assessors? Well, I've mentioned it earlier, is that the assessors can sometimes go out of scope quickly. And once they start to go out of scope, it can start to cause issues and trouble with the assessment. So essentially what you want to do is, again, be familiar with that assessment guide, or at least seek support to do so, and keep those assessors within scope, because they will go out of scope unintentionally. Again, not intentional. They might not understand the way a system works, right? Because understanding where that assessor is coming from, the requirements to be a lead assessor is that you've been conducting assessments for 3 years. It doesn't have to say that you've been conducting assessments for a manufacturing company. You've been conducting assessments for an IC organization. There is no requirement specific to that, but so you may have an assessor that might not be familiar with the environment that they're assessing. So that's just something to think about. And again, those documents are there to help you. They're there to help you prepare for the assessment. They're there to help the assessor through the assessment, use them and abide by them. Next slide, please. All right, so mentioned all these things. I got to keep track of all of these things with it. 320 objectives out of the 110 controls. How do I keep track of all of this, right? Well, initially, right off the bat, and I didn't put a slide in there, but Splunk itself can help to satisfy or support to satisfy 40 of the 110 controls, and that's just Splunk Core and Splunk ES, right? That doesn't include the SOAR functionality. That's just Splunk the way that you're probably using Splunk today, or you're looking to implement Splunk in the future. And that is a large amount of the security controls for these requirements. So essentially what that's doing is it's kind of bringing all those controls together into kind of one platform that you can start to satisfy them. Because some of the difficulty that we've seen with organizations is, sure, you can go through logs manually. You can, absolutely, and meet those requirements, but you're going to have to prove to me that you're doing it at the interval that is required, right? Are you going through them weekly? Are you actually going through them weekly? I want to see some sort of artifact that verifies that your sysadmin is going through those logs weekly. I want to see some sort of artifact that verifies that your team is going through the security alerts on your EDR. I want to verify that your team has the capability to identify when there's an intrusion in your environment. How are you doing that? How's that process built? What tools are you using? These are the questions. These are the hard questions that the assessor is going to ask. And that's why something like Splunk can help you with majority of those controls, is it consolidates them all down into one platform. And so what is Compliance Essentials? Well, it's a free Splunk-based app, but it's built around the 853. And I mentioned that before, is all the controls for level 2 are pulled from the 853. So again, it's something that's free. And if you're already using Splunk, it's kind of a no-brainer. It allows you to track the requirements, the compliance of those requirements, and artifacts. You can add in notes to say, hey, this is where the artifact is. Here's the primary stakeholder. Here's the individual to interview when reviewing these controls. You can start to set the conditions for the assessor before they show up on site. Corey, if you could go back. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you can start to set those conditions prior to that assessor showing up. You can track that. You can provide this. I'll tell you, as an assessor, if I showed up on site and the first thing you pull up is you have your SSP on hand and you pull up a dashboard with compliance essentials with all of your artifacts outlined, I'm already going to have a favorable opinion of the environment. Um, and I know kind of it's set expectations for me as well. If I show up and your SSP is 3 pages and and you pull up an Excel document that has limited, limited access, or not limited access, but limited change management or change control, I'm going to be a little concerned about what's about to occur. And I may recommend that you defer the assessment to a future date to allow you time to prepare, essentially. And then the last is it does provide an executive overview, right? If I'm the CISO, I'm the CIO here at August Schell. It's nice for me to be able to log into a dashboard and see when my team, maybe something has fallen out of compliance, but I'm able to track that and I can follow up with a team member or the primary stakeholder to make sure that they have a plan for remediation and it's tracked in the POA&M. Because if you're not tracking your change management in a POA&M that's aligned with CMMC, that could become an issue during your assessment. All right, next slide. All right, so I kind of mentioned it before, but how can Splunk, right? We already talked about compliance essentials. I kind of covered this with how can Splunk help you with your CMMC level 2 requirements. But again, it fulfills 40 of those 110, right? We're not at 50%, but we're closely approaching 50%. It helps to satisfy or satisfies completely 40 of those requirements. And again, within those 110 requirements, there's 320 objectives. And Splunk specifically addresses 8 requirement families, access control, and that's 8 controls from access control, all 9 of the audit and accountability, all 3 of the incident response. And again, some of those are Splunk Core and Splunk ES, and 2 of the risk assessment, 2 of the configuration management. Additionally, I actually didn't, and that's a hit on me, I actually didn't look at additional risk assessment controls that compliance essentials can help to answer or satisfy. And then there's 5 identification authentication, 5 system and communications protection, and 6 system and information integrity. So out of how do you track all those 320 objectives? My recommendation, use something like Splunk with Compliance Essentials to help your team collaborate, right? Because this is a collaborative effort depending on the size of your organization. And also you can start to control who has access to what data with role-based access control. That's something that you can't do if you're using an Excel spreadsheet. That's, I think that's it for me. Corey, next slide.
All right, so now we come to the point in the presentation for any questions that anyone may have. We open up the floor. And I will say our information is here. So if you need to reach out and you have any additional questions that may not come up today, or you can always reach out to us and ask us those questions. We do free consultations, as well as on our website. We have some information. We regularly update it as rules come out from the Department of War and Cyber AB to make sure that we're projecting the most current and accurate information.
No questions. Thanks very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else with any questions?
No questions for me. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, again, we would like to thank you all for showing up today. Of course, CMMC is very, very important to our national security and protecting, national security information as well as your business information, that intellectual property from falling into the hands of our adversaries that would love to use it for their own gain. Again, our contact information is here. If you need to reach out, you have any questions, please reach out and do so. And we'll close it out with ABC, always be CMMCing. Have a nice day, everybody.